and welcome. Thank you all for coming. My name is Karen Altis. I'm a career counselor at the Center for Career and Calling. And how many people have already been through a Career Week workshop so far today? Several of you. Yay, good for you for taking advantage. I'm expecting we'll have some latecomers, so we'll hopefully there's some end seats they can slip into. So everybody's picked up a passport and you're getting it stamped on your stops. This is what you get for undergraduate students. If you come to 3 or more, you'll get this on Friday, so keep on coming. We're going to get started. We're going to go till about 8:15 and hopefully have some time for Q&A and visit and network at the end as well. So our guest tonight is Lynette Bikos. Dr. Lynette Bikos, excuse me, Professor of Clinical Psychology and Associate Dean of the School of Psychology, Family and Community here at SPU. She is a licensed psychologist, holds the designation of Master Career Counselor in the National Career Development Association. And her research is fascinating. It falls at the intersection of vocational, international, and positive psychology. She is very interested in the effects of international transitions and their effects on psychosocial, spiritual, and global outcomes, particularly those with career development implications, such as calling and vocational identity. Love it, front row people. Thank you. Dr. Bikos has served on the editorial boards of 3 research journals, has received multiple presidential citations from the APA's Division of International Psychology, was recently awarded an appointment to a multi-institutional research consortium for study abroad, and is a fellow of the Western Psychological Association. We are honored to have her. Please welcome Dr. Lynette.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll start with a story. It was 1980s. Actually, it was 1989, and I was 22 years old, and I was about to graduate with my master's degree in educational and counseling psychology. Somewhere in my freshman or sophomore year, I figured out that that undergrad degree in counselor education wasn't going to pay off so well, so I convinced my parents I could get done in 5 years by going to summer school, and a master's sounded more convincing to them, so that worked out for them. After struggling my freshman year to choose a major, I landed on a plan to get those degrees in 5 years, and I understood my calling to be program development in an inner city agency. And I remember very clearly the vision that had come to me through a guided career fantasy that I had taken as one of the career courses at Mizzou, University of Missouri Columbia. And the image that I had was that I would be the executive director of United Methodist Metro Ministries in St. Louis, Missouri. And I imagined everything. I imagined the house I was staying in. I imagined myself being this busy person going to board meetings and Sunday school classes and advocating for the agency and raising money and doing all this program development. And I did all the right things. All right, the pictures. This is me in my dorm room at Mizzou. I did all the right things. I spent one summer with the Office of Creative Ministries with this small team facilitating vacation Bible schools in supremely low-income churches in rural Missouri. And I spent another summer as an intern living at a kind of dorm room at United Methodist Metro Ministries, where I had this vision that I wanted to work. And that summer I was also involved, I worked there, I lived at Metro Ministries and worked at Kingdom House, which is another United Methodist agency. I was very involved in the Wesley Foundation, which was our campus ministries program. And I was very involved in their clown ministries and music program. And so I had done all the right things, and I was a little self-righteous and smug about this whole deal. In Sunday school, when we would talk about loving our neighbor, right, and serving others and be challenged to do that, I would just sort of smile and say, got that box checked, because I've got my plan for saving the world, right? And so there I was. So as May graduation approached, it came time to apply for jobs, so I scoured the United Methodist Reporter and applied for all the jobs at the agencies in the area. And as luck would have it, a program coordinator at United Methodist Metro Ministries, my vision came open. And I applied, and I was interviewed, and I was offered the position for $19,000. It was 1989 in St. Louis, so that was good. And it was all wrong. Like, right here, it was wrong. I knew it was wrong. And I can't tell you why it was wrong. The only hint that I can articulate that I knew it was wrong was that while I was at the interview, I saw an acquaintance that I'd known from the Wesley Foundation, and she'd been there for a year doing this, maybe an AmeriCorps volunteer stipended kind of position, and she just looked spent, burned out, described herself as burned out, and she didn't want to be there, and I knew it was wrong. And I can't explain it, and I turned down the position and started again. I don't know, yes, maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not going to work. I'm in presenter mode. The slide here is supposed to say, get out your phones and text me the answer, but this doesn't appear to be working. So we'll just shout out the answers. What went wrong? What went wrong? You haven't, I can tell on the look on your face. You have an answer. What went wrong?
I guess your calling was wrong.
My calling was wrong, yeah. What went wrong? Oh, and I cried and I prayed, and I'm here today. It worked out. Got any ideas about what went wrong? Carla, what went wrong?
You weren't happy?
I wasn't happy? Yeah.
You followed all the right things?
Yeah?
From here.
Yeah.
The
Oh.
plan was perfect.
Yeah.
Then something happened.
Something
From
happened.
a gut, huh?
From the gut, right there. It was real. Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to solve that problem and maybe offer some solutions in case you have something ever like it. We're going to just briefly talk about calling, and I am a vocational psychologist. I'm not a theologian. So my expertise in the area of calling is, besides my own personal experience of having it and then not following it at that point, is my career training in the profession. So all of my perspectives are going to be from the perspective of psychological science and vocational psychology. We're going to talk about callings disrupted, and then I want to present you some scenarios and strategies for disruption, and then at the end I want to revisit the role of calling. So that's what we're going to do. What's really exciting in my discipline is that all of a sudden there has been this explosion of calling research, understanding what calling is. And in fact, last year, I'm super nervous tonight because last year I hosted the guest speaker, who was a real speaker. Dr. Brian Dick from Colorado State is an expert in calling. He and his colleague, Brian Duffy, created the calling scales that we're using in my research, and I just followed him around like a little puppy and offered to keep him at my house and so that I could just get everything from it. But they've just done a ton of work on calling, and it's been super helpful. Their definition of calling has three things. If you have a calling, three things are going on. One is you have a transcendent summons, an external call. There has to be a caller in order to have a calling. I think that's what he told us last year. And that calling needs to be to a particular life role that is purposeful or meaningful. So it's not a calling if it doesn't come from somewhere else and it doesn't direct you toward a life of purpose or meaning. It gives meaning to what you do, and it's altruistic in nature, so it has other-oriented values and goals. So those are the three things that comprise calling. And I just would add a few notes on it. Dick and Duffy worked very hard. They are Christian, but they worked very hard to make this definition accessible to non-religious populations. So for example, I told you that the first part is that it's a transcendent summons. And so we, as at SPU, if you're a Christian, you probably understand that transcendent summons as coming from the God that we believe in, right? But it could come from a family legacy. So maybe you have a family whose tradition is medicine or law or teaching or the military. And so that external summons might come outwardly from your family saying, you're one of us, and so you join the family tradition. In my own family, I'm a Missouri farmer's daughter. And so there's this farm, and it could have been quite likely that my brother would have been tapped to take on the farm, and that would have been a calling in the sense that, that it came from an external source. Or something might happen to you that would call you to a particular life role, maybe a caretaker of someone who's ill or had an injury. Does that make sense? So the calling comes from somewhere else, and it's purposeful and meaningful. I would add, though, that at SPU, we have the unique opportunity to explore calling from a Christian perspective. So I offer the wide array to you tonight. If you are not Christian or not religion, you can certainly entertain calling in the other idea. But if you are, I encourage you to embrace your Christian faith as you understand. Also in this presentation, the calling definition that I'm working with aligns very well with Dr. Cascella's idea of missional calling. Has anyone heard him speak yet about this? So awesome. And Dr. Cascella talks about 3 kinds of calling, but the one that applies most to career and vocational planning, I think, is this idea of missional calling. And it's a person's particular guiding purpose, or I should say, or mission. And it's a theme that finds expression through one's life and one's career, volunteer work, or family life roles. So that's the closest we're getting to theology tonight. Okay, questions at this point? All right, here we go. Oh yes. So I think this one was supposed to say, and these worked so well in my office. I don't know what happened. And I was like going to be like on the edge. They're like, what are you going to do? Because I normally teach doctoral students. I don't have to be entertaining at all. And so I'm like, oh, I just learned this new technology. I'm an early adopter. This is going to be great. This one, I believe, was supposed to say, wait, let's see what comes next. Oh, right. My disruption in calling came from inside me, right? So I was headed down this path. I was even offered the job. And I knew something was wrong, and I declined it. And so it was a bit of a calling disrupted. So you are where you are. I presume most of your juniors and seniors may be getting ready to graduate. What are disruptions? And if calling is too strong a word, what are potential disruptions in your career plans, or maybe not yours, but a friend's, or maybe someone who graduated last year, an alumni, and you've watched your friends go on? What are disruptions to their career planning and their execution of career planning as they've looked for jobs and entered them or not entered them? I'm just looking for classifications of plans. Talk to your neighbor first. I'm sorry, yes.
I know that there have been like some people I know that just didn't get into the grad school they wanted to get into. That's kind of like that was their next step.
Their plan was grad school.
Yeah.
It was super competitive. Yeah. Good. That's an excellent one. Yeah.
I know people who have taken internships and stuff and then realized that what they were looking at kind of wasn't what they expected, right? That when they got there, they were like, this isn't actually what I want to do now that I know what it's really like in practice.
Right. So now that I've been dipped in it, it's not what I hoped for or imagined. Yeah. What else? A couple more examples. Those are great. Yeah.
Getting a job outside of school to pay off debt and then making that your career rather than going into what you wanted to do.
Got it. So you have to take a job because it pays more than $19,000 a year. Yeah, even though over there, yeah, okay. Good, excellent. Anybody else got it? Yes, ma'am.
Maybe having multiple interests and maybe choosing one of them as a major focus when the minor focus that you chose maybe should have been your major focus.
Okay. So she had multiple options, took one of them, and then was looking backwards going, maybe that would have been, yeah.
Luckily for her, like, it was a close switch. Okay. It could have been.
Okay. Great. Any more? One last one? Yes, ma'am.
I remember trying to talk employers into hiring me, and they would say, now how old are you? And what have you done? So I think I had to get realistic in terms of what was just the next step.
Right.
Maybe eventually go to graduate school and get my training and do what I eventually wanted to do.
Excellent. Perfect. You gave exactly the answers I was hoping for on the not working poll everywhere. And so I want to talk about kind of how to respond to those. And in career counseling and career counseling, career and life development, vocational psychology, all that kind of stuff means the same for me. In all those areas, we work from a number of different theories about how career planning and placement happens. And one of those is a set of trait factor theories. And in the trait factor theory world, there's you, and there's the world of work, right? And the notion with trait factor theories is that the better, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have gone that far yet. The closer that you align with the world of work, your skills and interests and values align with whatever you choose in the world of work, the more likely you're going to be happy, satisfied, congruent. The higher the degree of congruence between you and what you choose in the world of work, the more satisfied you're going to be. Does that make sense? This is kind of like really basic math. It was novel and ground shaking the first time anyone said it. And so trait factor theories, sometimes we call them person-environment theories, are useful. We can look at person-environment congruence at a variety of stages of career decision making. So when you came here as a freshman or sophomore and you said, I don't know what I want to do, someone said, hey, we've got this great Center for Calling and Career, why don't you go over there? And you went over there and maybe you took some personality assessments and learned about the world of work. It kind of made you sort of think about choosing a college major. Well, those similar or parallel strategies are also appropriate in the micro level when you're beginning to apply for a job and now you have a resume and you're trying to align it with something to do in the world of work. So whether you're at that sort of beginning, the whole world of work is new for me, and going from the way broad to sort of more narrow, or you're kind of at this place in choosing a job, applying for jobs, you can use these strategies for both. And so I kind of wrote these two columns, exploring you and exploring the world of work, with both in mind, sort of for the freshman beginning to choose a major, and more for the senior beginning to evaluate different kinds of jobs. So if you're exploring you, there's formal assessments, there's surveys for interest, skills, and values. There's career counseling and coaching, and you can use it both at that early stage and at the later stage as a sounding board for the intentional exploration of life career development. How are we going to blend together the many life roles we have, not just the one we get paid for, but being a volunteer, being a citizen, how am I going to fit in family? And we can also use career counselors and coaches for comparing options. And so at the time that you engage the job search, then, you can re-inventory, if you want, skills, values, and interests. You can identify tangible targets. Probably there's not just one job out there that's going to make you happy, but there are several jobs out there, or several clusters of kinds of work that will align with what you learned in school. And to the degree that you can target resumes and cover letters, that'll be super helpful. You can also explore the world of work. Again, both of that, what's a major in psychology like, or what are careers in psychology like, to the very more specific. And if you're looking at general kinds of information, the Occupational Outlook Handbook from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and ONET are some really helpful resources if you're just sort of looking at what is a career like in blah, what's a career like in nursing, what's a career like in engineering. But if you're looking then to evaluate options like, do I want to work for Boeing or Microsoft? Do I want this kind of engineering position or that kind of engineering position? Then you have to be more creative. And so to read about it might be looking at annual reports or information that they have on the web. It might be talking about it, read about it, talk about it, try it out. And so talking about it might be finding someone who works at Microsoft or Boeing, or finding someone who works at a nonprofit and interviewing them about that. And then trying it out, maybe asking, besides the interview that you go to, maybe going and hanging out with someone for a day, talking to people who work there, internships, part-time work, or the full-time plan. So that's just a quick and dirty reminding you that at all these stages, it's important to explore you and explore the world of work and see how they merge or converge. That was a little tangent. Let's get back to calling. Okay, so I want to talk about then, in the examples that you gave of calling disrupted, some strategies that generally rely on that trait factor theory approach. That was the lecture-y, boring part of the evening that my doctoral students would expect. We'll get back to more interesting stuff now. So I want to talk about several different classifications, kind of scenarios that might happen. And so here's some things that if I had imagined, if you had filled out the poll-out thing, the poll everywhere, that you would have said. One was, I didn't get the job I was hoping for. It turns out it takes more different training than what I wanted to do. My boss won't let me do the cool stuff. Carl, I think that was you, right? I wanted, this entry-level stuff stinks. And so one set of scenarios might be, I need a plan B. Then that was my case. This is my image, my calling. I know I want to be the executive director someday of United Methodist Metro Ministries. And I went, and the project coordinator job they had didn't feel right. And I didn't go ahead and take it. I could have gone ahead and take it for not that much money, and I knew I would have been unhappy. I could have taken it. That would have been an okay option. I think things would have turned out okay if I had done that. But it was, I remember that interview was January, February, and I had enough time to reroute. And so what I chose to do was reroute. And so this set of strategies and scenarios is about a plan B. Plan B might be rerouting. And one strategy for rerouting is 52 card pickup. You've played 52 card pickup? We used to always try to tease my grandma. Grandma, do you want to play 52 card pickup? She'd be doing the dishes. Sure, I'll play with you. And then we'd take the cards, right, throw them in the air and say, okay, pick them up. Well, 52 card pickup with your interests and skills and values works a little differently, right? I was going through my head with that vision for how I was going to craft those skills and values and interests in a particular line of agency work for low-income, at-risk folks doing that sort of missional work. And what I needed to do was kind of just untangle that resume that I had put together for that particular job and reorganize my skills and interests and values in a different way. And at the time, I identified two very clear different paths. It turns out that while I was getting that master's degree at Mizzou, I did more things than just prepare for that career. I just hadn't realized it. One is that I fell in love with all these. Mizzou had in their doctoral program in counseling psychology, was famous for their career planning, vocational psychology program. And in my master's program, I had a lot of elective room, and every time I had a spare elective, I would go take another one of their career courses. And I sort of hadn't realized that I had done that. Like, I honestly had not realized that I had done that. I just liked the people and kept signing up for their courses. And so immediately, I rewrote a resume that was targeted toward career counseling positions at college universities and landed one at Wichita State University. I had another plan B, and that was I had been a really active 4-H'er. I don't know if you're familiar with the 4-H Youth Development Organization, but I had even in the alumni status continued to teach clowning, of all things, to the youth in Columbia 4-H, and I had volunteered as a judge for different kinds of things. So I had continued that life a little bit. And so I began an application with University of Missouri Extension, which would have made me as a 4-H agent. So I just sort of played 52 card pickup, right? I threw up what I thought was my plan and kind of organized it in different ways and then had, boom, these two targeted resumes that looked like they were made for those different kinds of tracks of jobs. And a career counselor can really help you kind of look at what you've got, untangle it, and put it back together again. So that would be rerouting. Make sense? Not do anything different, just reroute and look for different kinds of jobs and head down that path. Another plan is retooling. Eventually I retooled. Eventually I went back to grad school and got my Ph.D., right? But it wasn't right at that particular time. And so retooling might be to say, okay, now that I've kind of dabbled more intentionally in looking at what I can get paid to do out here, what do I need to do it? And so that might be going back to school or getting a certification. I can't tell you how many students I know who get a bachelor's degree and then actually go and get like a certification in PT Tech or some different kinds of things. It feels kind of backwards, but actually it's not, and it works actually beautifully well for them. So all kinds of options in rerouting and retooling. Questions about Plan B? Comments? Okay. Let's look at another set of scenarios. I expected to be making a bigger difference in this world. This is painfully boring. Entry level is a drag. But I have to keep this job, at least for now. This is the one that I have, and can't go to grad school, and I'm tired of school anyway. Like, who isn't tired of school? And so what am I going to do? Oops. Go back. That's such a pretty picture. There's a 1999 article out of the Academy of Management Review, so it's more of an HR or industrial organizational psychology journal than my own. And they wrote this article that's been cited a number of times about how people cope who do dirty work. And so they define dirty work in some interesting ways. One is that it's physically dirty, like garbage collectors or the people who chase stray dogs those kinds of works. Orderlies, morticians, funeral directors. Sometimes the dirty work is work where the values are questioned, exotic dancers. Or just sort of undesirable dirty work. And so they, this wasn't original research, but it's a summary of everything that they could find to understand how those folks cope, how they see themselves, how they deal with notions of occupational prestige, how they do social comparisons, all different kinds of things like that. And from this article are 3 sets of more R's. I had retool and reroute, but they had 3 R's that they found were helpful, either naturally emerging from these folks in terms of how they thrived at work, or things that career counselors or others can do to help folks challenge at work when you have questions like the ones I just list. This is insufferably boring, this is not meaningful work, those kinds of things. And the first set of skills are about reframing. And that's where you actually transform the meaning of the work that you do. And the 2 strategies that are used within reframing are infusing positive values into things that may not seem so positive, and neutralizing the negative aspects. And so, so now all of those examples escape from me. So if you want to help with examples, that would be great. Let's think of a. Yeah, yes ma'am.
Like one of the boring is that when you go home you have energy still. And so, I don't know if it's neutralizing, but because it's so boring during the day and I don't use up that much energy, then I have energy in the evening to do other things.
Right, so it kind of reframes it, right. It sort of saves my energy for the important things I need to do. There we go. That's another one. Yes, ma'am. Patty.
Oh, I was going to say, Brian did use the example of the guy out in the middle of nowhere where he had to direct traffic when there were road
Yes, he did. What was the end of that story? I don't remember.
And he just felt like he was doing such a service of being, you know, ensuring that the drivers were safe.
Yes, he did a great job with that. Right, yeah. Garbage collection, this, you know, it's a huge... If you, like, I was in Vancouver when there was a garbage strike, right? So just reframing the work you do as adding value to society, because it's part of public sanitation and it's part of being in the year 2014 that we have, yeah.
I remember when I met a sanitation worker who was picking up our trash, and he was listening to NPR. And we had a great conversation. I said, boy, you get to listen to a lot of NPR in your job. He said, oh, I love it. I learned everything. Yeah. That's a great reason to have that job.
Yeah.
Get to listen to NPR all day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Of these 3 sets of skills, reframing, recalibrating, and refocusing, the authors posited that if you can cognitively reframe that you're doing so that it is meaningful, that's the strongest one, and that'll get you the biggest payoff. And there are just times when, who's my employer listening? Everyone's job sometimes stinks at some time. Over a break, I spent 6 days cleaning and analyzing data, and that's not the fun part of analyzing data, cleaning it. And we have, Karen, you did a lovely job of introducing our research, but we do longitudinal research with Sprint. And so the students complete, and if you're a sprinter, I won't make you, out yourself, thank you very much, because they complete these insufferably long surveys, surveys 5 times from pre-departure through a year re-entry. And occasionally the data gets on the wrong line and you have to just manually go through and check all this data. So 6 days I spent just cleaning the data. I began to analyze it, discovered more errors, and spent 2 more days continuing to clean. So it's terrible. It's all those things that I wrote up there. Hate it. But I'm reframing in my head, oh, it feels so good to know how to do this in SPSS. Oh, it feels so good, to get my data ready for this important analysis. Oh, the data is going to be so error-free. You just tell yourself that over and over and over again, right? You reframe it so that it's meaningful work. And gee, how motivated I am to teach my doctoral students to do this for me, so this will be the last time I ever have to do this again. All right. The next set of skills is about recalibrating. And this is not, reframing is about changing the meaning of the work. Recalibrating is about adjusting the standards, adjusting your own standards to assess how much or how good the undesirable work is. Sort of the, oh, it's not that bad kind of thing. And they talked about orderlies in a hospital. If I didn't, do something icky, like clean up all the stuff that comes out of bodies, which is dirty, then some other important work wouldn't get done. And so you just sort of minimize in your head the standards for how much of that life space your takes, and sort of recalibrate it so that you understand the more positive work, the more positive parts of your work are more positive than they probably really are, and the less positive parts of the work are more positive than they, something like that. Got it? Okay. Refocusing has to do with shifting your attention to the more desirable and meaningful aspects of the job. That actually is your example perfect. The NPR, the person doing the sanitation worker saying, oh, I get to listen to NPR. I am so smart. I can have a conversation with like the hoitiest of people in the know, and I'm right there with them. Oh, I had an example and it escaped me. Other examples for these 3 sets of skills? Have you used them? Do you have a good story? I love stories. Yeah?
Recently when I was working a job that didn't line up with my career goals, I noticed that there were a lot of skills that I used in that job that I needed to develop in myself that would have helped anywhere and within all aspects of my life. And so I became more attentive to using those skills and developing them, even though it wasn't filling, even though it didn't directly add to my career.
Excellent. So you weren't digging the job so much. You identified some skills that you could hone there that you could then transfer with you elsewhere. So developing, technically we call those transferable skills or functional skills, right, that you could use in places that you really wanted to go. Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of just about any entry-level job, that if it's not your dream job, if you just do it really, really well, you're going to leave with a great reference, and that's going to help you.
Oh, right.
You can keep that in mind.
Right. So kind of think of that as one of the outcomes that's going to happen because you're doing such a great job. Yeah. Yes?
I had another example. I worked for PT, just like cleaning the linens and stuff for them and helping patients through some exercises. And I realized, I really didn't like the job because I felt like I was cleaning linens all the time. But I realized through the experience of watching the PT work that this isn't actually what I want to do. Excellent. So that was like a good refocusing thing for it helped me even though I didn't enjoy the job.
Mm-hmm. So. Excellent. All of these are great stories. I remember helping a senior back at Wichita State. And at the time, Wichita was the home of Pizza Hut. We claimed fame for a couple of things. We were the aircraft capital of the world, or so we thought. And Pizza Hut was at that time headquartered there, although it moved later to Texas. And so I was helping a senior put together, I think she was like a marketing senior or something, and she was putting together her resume, and she was just so kind of tired, and she was listing the things that she had done, Pizza Hut, waitress. That's all I got. Okay. And so I began to ask her, well, tell me what you do at Pizza Hut. And she was like, and she started kind of listing. I'm like, let's list everything that you do, everything. And then she lit up and said, but there's this one thing. Okay, tell me about the one thing. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes they have birthday parties for kids, and I'm the coordinator for the birthday parties, right? And she came to life about planning birthday parties for kids, and so we were like, that's such important information in this job that you don't feel so much excitement about. Let's put that at the top of the list of the things that you do and sell it, even though maybe it happens once a month, and you do everything else. You wash dishes more times a month. Let's play that card hard and heavy. So just kind of thinking about the things that you do enjoy, even though you may not get to do them very often. Brian Dick also talked about job crafting, and that's kind of the example of the Pizza Hut, the young lady that worked at Pizza Hut. But within your job setting, you do have some control over things, right? And so in the job, I'm guessing that you didn't like so much, there were a few things that you really enjoyed. And so to the degree that you can take charge of that job, it's amazing, I found, that if there's things that you like to do at work and you start doing them really well, guess what? They're yours. They just give them to you because someone else doesn't like to do them. And you kind of feel guilty, like, oh, I get to do the funnest things. But God made us so that we all like different fun things. And so a lot of times that works out really well. So you kind of just take your job by the reins and do what you can to shape the tasks and the relational and cognitive parameters of your work so that they increase your sense of joy and your sense of contributing to others' well-being. Which has a function of increasing the meaningfulness of the work. Okay. So those were the strategies, right? What were they? We talked about from a trait factor perspective, meaning we're keeping you in mind and we're keeping the work that you're doing in mind. We talked about finding a plan B through rewriting or retooling. And we talked about reframing, refocusing, and recalibrating. And we talked about job crafting as ways to respond to a changing call. But I want to come back briefly and say, so if our calling might be disrupted, what is the purpose of having a calling in the first place? I think it's a fair question. And as I thought about tonight, I thought someone is maybe going to ask that difficult question. Like, was it really a calling if I decided not to even follow it? And did I mess up, or did God mess up, or whatever the caller was mess up? And so I thought that I wanted to just revisit the purpose of calling before I closed out. And I think that the first important thing is maybe I had I'll just talk about me. I had a sense of calling. I, as a Christian college student, believed that calling came from God, and I also believed that the message, don't go, also came from God. So that kind of makes for a theological tailspin, right? It's just you trying to figure it out. And so how do we avoid a theological tailspin? One is, I think, let's recall the definition of missional calling. And Doug's book is just out. I saw it today on Amazon.com when I wanted to look up the publication date. It's so exciting. And so when he I'm not going to tell you about the other two kinds of callings he identifies. But the missional calling is the one that makes sense for us in the career counseling business, right? Because it's about identifying who you are and how you can bring meaning and purpose to the work, no matter what life role you're in. No matter what job you have, although it may lead you to choose some jobs over others, or no matter if you're in your role as a parent or a citizen or an adult child or any of those kinds of things, you can live out your missional calling in those different kinds of arenas and roles. So if you begin to think about calling as that way, it can help this theological tailspin. Was that very clear direction I had wasted, right? I spent all that time kind of gearing myself toward being someday an executive director at United Methodist Metro Ministries. And so was it wasted? And I'm telling you, I don't think it was, and I don't think it was wrong. Because callings are directional. And they're directional in the sense that they lead you to the purposeful accumulation of skills and your exploration of interests and values. And you accumulate these assets and experiences that can be functionally transferred somewhere else, right? And so in that sense, callings are directional. And similarly, they invoke goal-directed behaviors. We're inclined to stay in school. We're inclined to get our degree or get various certifications. We're inclined to pursue certain internships. Those times that I had with the Vacation Bible School trucking around in that 1970, no kidding, pickup truck that belonged to the Office of Creative Ministries, right? All those experiences that I accumulated weren't wasted. I didn't use them immediately then, but I tell you, you just have no idea in what contexts those experiences will come up and you'll draw from them again. Yes, ma'am. Oh, was that you're just checking your eye? Okay. All right. So in that sense, I wanted to revisit this because I don't think a calling is a contract. I think it leads you in purposeful direction, and sort of thinking of it that way maybe can be more helpful. Yeah. I love NPR, and for these. Ever since you asked me, Karen, to do this, and just because we're doing calling research as well, I hear these stories, and then it'll occur to me like several hours later, that was a story about a calling. I don't want to lose that. So I started to collect these calling stories, and I think you posted the PDF to the website.
I will. I haven't.
Okay, and so they're really fun stories, and you may listen to them and say, I don't know what she thought that was a calling for, but you'll just have to sort of project onto me what you think I might have been thinking. But they're all different, and the one that caught me was several weeks ago, one of them caught me was this iron worker, and they talked about building that bridge, I don't even know how to say it, some kind of big bridge. And so they're interviewing this iron worker, and all of a sudden he talked about, my dad was an iron worker, my uncle was an iron worker, the whole family, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? And he talked about this amazing calling to be an iron worker. We're strong, we're tough, and every time I drive across that bridge, I think, my grandpa helped build that, or I helped build that. I would have not thought of calling in that way, and yet I loved that particular story. And there's all kinds of stories about another one that I liked, this if they left, if we left, they wouldn't have no body. They talked about a janitor and a cook who worked in an adult care home, and it was just a calling kind of for a weekend, but the home went out of business, and all the professional caretakers and the owners left the people there. For a weekend, these two, it was more probably of a direct calling in Doug's language, so I told you one of the other two, used the skills they had to care for these people, and it left a legacy on their life. And so just all different kinds of stories about calling. So I think that's it. So what questions do you have? We can go back and look at any of the slides. You can challenge me on anything, and I'll probably crumble right in front of you, but won't be the first time. I teach statistics. I crumble all the time. Dr. Bikos, we don't understand the minutiae of degrees of freedom. Neither have I. But right there together. Questions? Comments? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So after you get the 2-card pickup with your skills,
yes.
How would what would be the best place to start to find just a list of careers that take those skills or take skills? I think in my past, I think I had a very limited perspective of the different jobs that existed. So
yes.
So having a wider variety of jobs, awareness of that would have been really helpful. So I was wondering, what's the best place to start to find it?
Right. What is the best place to start? Well, you probably want to start a multidimensional search, right? And so if you're really kind of at that back broad level, I would start with these two. It's like if you're at like if you're at the super broad, then looking at the Occupational Outlook Handbook or ONET in terms of big, large industry or job categories can be helpful because it'll brainstorm for you. If you're kind of at a middle level, it really would be worth going to a career center, the University Career Center, and looking at some of the tools. If you took a self-directed search and kind of understood your own personality traits, there's some tools that go with those. So you can say, oh, I'm an what am I? I'm an SEA. I can look up SEA jobs and kind of get some ideas that are out there. So there's some of those sort of formal tools. If you're further along, my guess is you've met people that do some really interesting things, and you think, I'd like to know more about what you do. So you ask them, what do you do? And if you weren't doing this job, what other 4 jobs could you do? Right? And so that networking is probably more effective at your stage than starting from the very first square. Carla, Patty, Karen?
You did all. Good. Yeah, you did.
It's been a while.
It's free.
And they're really good. Yeah, good. That was really great.
You gave positive examples of family legacy, like the bridge builders. What happens if you can't, or you really kind of in secret don't want to follow that family legacy?
Right. I haven't prepared that presentation yet. That's next month. I was going to go back to the literature and look. So what if you don't want to do what your parents or God called you to do, right? That's a tough one. There are great family counselors in this world. So, you know, I guess, because I've been thinking about, ever since you invited me, I've been thinking, oh, what am I going to say, or how am I going to talk about this? And so sort of my preliminary thoughts, so luckily I did have like a 24-hour queue that this might come up. But I'm also still cleaning my data, and the article's due Thursday, so I'm a little distracted. One of the things I thought was, I bet we've all disappointed our parents, right? We have skill in disappointing our parents. Yeah. And odds are my parents aren't going to hear this, so I can disclose more about them. You know, so I'm from a farm family, and I clearly remember announcing to my mom that I was accepted at the University of Kansas to get a degree in counseling psychology. And I'd been raised like, boys bad, education good. Right? No. And so just stay in school and you're a good kid, right? And so then I said, boys bad, although I had just gotten married, so boys were better. I'm going to get this doctorate in counseling psychology. And they were sort of like not sure what to do with that. That's a whole lot of education, like for a girl. Like, don't you want to have kids now that you're married and you're 25, and are you sure you want to do this, right? So I think at some level we disappoint them, and so it's a matter of sort of gently, delicately saying, this is where I feel like, you know, having conversations with them, so not avoiding them, using your mature skills as possible. Even now I have to draw on sometimes them with my parents. So I think you do have to have honest conversations with them. I didn't find it, but there was another story in Calling NPR story where the father had a foot massaging business, and the two boys, one of them was going to have to inherit it, and they left it to reading tea leaves. True story. Wow. I think it was on it was in San Francisco or something, and the one who didn't want it the most got it. And then years later admitted how much joy it brought to him. So, you know, there's stories that go both ways, right? Your parents want you to do it and you want to do it. Your parents want you to do it and you don't do it. So there's all different kinds of stories, and there's no magic answer, but probably mature conversations with parents, maybe even in limited doses. Yeah. Yep. What else? And I don't know, Karen, you guys, Karen or Carla, any parents? Okay, to go to, yes.
I have something that's maybe slightly off topic from like the category, but I know you're interested in like international transitions and such. And I just noticed that because I've kind of been interested in maybe working overseas for a time or something. I wondered if you have any insight on like I don't know what your specialty is in that, but if you have anything like relating to this that you might share about.
Right. So this is interesting. My husband works for a large multinational corporation that I won't name because he might listen to it. And we went I was actually a trailing spouse and lived in Turkey for 3.5 years. And so recently after my Ph.D., and my background is in career counseling, so I was very interested in transitions anyway, because in careers you're making transitions all the time. So it fit where I started doing studies with expats and trailing spouses and what the longitudinal transition is like. But because we both went, and we were both, his international dip is more from the working professional experience. I actually had my first assistant professorship at Middle East Technical University in Ankara, Turkey. We were both asked to participate after we'd been back some years on a grant at Purdue, advising about what it would be like to train undergraduate engineers to be globally ready. And his advice was his company would not be interested in sending a brand new entry-level person internationally because they need them to be good engineers first, right? So if you're interested in that kind of work, there are all kinds of different opportunities for it. Make sure you've got a good skill set, and then look for it and go for it. It was some of the most meaningful work that we've ever done. To live and work internationally. Here, so my own expertise, because we were in Turkey, I was able to round up 32 expat spouses and assess them kind of like we do with the Sprint program. We had 6 times over a year. We had 30 women in the study, and we had over 150 interviews with them at those same intervals to understand what the challenges were like for living internationally. So that was really fun. Coming back to here, SPU is a perfect place to understand the repatriation experiences of young adult missionary kids. And so we've got a couple articles looking at what it's like and what the career needs are, particularly about repatriated missionary kids. And now the work is mostly with Sprint, although we've done some of my dissertation students have looked at NGOs, international NGOs, and what work adjustment is like there. So I don't know if you had...
No, that was great.
But go for it. It's just, it's incredible. And the other thing, I think, I remember when, I remember having my kids, and I was 30-something, and sitting on the porch. It was Kansas, it was hot. And I remember reading from one of my undergraduate student friends about her time in Swaziland delivering babies. I was thinking, oh, I'm too old. I'm like, I wasted my young adulthood. And it was after that we went. So you can really do international at any time. And when you come back, you're richer for it in so many ways. Anything else? What else? Yes?
Well, I was kind of curious. On the right side of that column, underneath try it out,
yeah.
You have bottom full-time club. Which I've heard people talk about how, at some point, you just have to choose something and go for it. I'm curious. I've also heard a couple of that if you don't like the job you're in, you should stay for at least a year to either get a good feel for it, or it looks maybe a little bit better that you didn't just hop in, hop out real quickly, right? You gave it some depth. I guess, maybe what's your opinion about the whole plan?
I'll give you the official graduate school answer. You ready? It depends. It depends on you. It depends on how, are you hopping all the time? Because if you're hopping all the time, this might be the time to try it out. Like stay the whole year. It depends on how small the network is in your particular discipline, and if you would actually get a bad reputation about it. If it's not going well for you, it may not be going well for your employer either. So they may be okay with you leaving, and they may be happy to write you a good reference. It depends on if you have another if you have another offer. If you have another offer and it looks like it's going to work really well there, then don't waste anyone's time. Go ahead and move, right? So it really depends on all of those different kinds of factors. Yeah, Carla,
yes,
Patty,
wise.
Karen.
Did you mean should you try it, jump in and commit?
Yeah, I mean,
You're sort of saying, should I try it? You know, jump into something even if you're not sure.
And I guess what you were saying about once you're in the position was helpful too. But
oh, okay.
I guess I'm hesitant. I'm hesitant about the plunge.
Woo! You're hesitant about taking the plunge. Yeah. You know, that's where some consultation would be helpful. Like to come back to even a professor who knows you well, and say, or somebody, an aunt or an uncle or a part-time job person that you trust, somebody that you trust. Read this job description. Whoop. Here was my experience at the job interview. You know me. What do you think? And a good, helpful mentor is going to say, oh, like you're not so good with timelines or deadlines, and this is deadline dependent, or that's a whole lot of math you're going to have to do, or that is so perfect for you. Look at this, and this, it aligns, and yeah, you're going to have to do these couple things, but this will prepare you for later. So just having a good, honest conversation with someone you trust and who knows you may be super, super helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then at some time you just have to do, or maybe your parents, right? My Trevor, just do it, right? It's interesting how you answer the parent question differently once you are one, and they're almost ready to do this, yeah.
And then as a young adult, we can also get stuck in this idea of it needs to be perfect, right? You know, fear, or I think there was a phrase when I was about this age, paralysis by analysis.
Yes. Yeah.
And we can examine it to a point where we just don't move. And that you're at a certain age, you have a lot of mobility, and especially, and different I think than when we were first in work. You know, loyalty and longevity was a lot higher value, and I think we're all seeing a little different kind of workforce that's more agile and a little more flexible.
Yes.
I was thinking too, I like the word experiment.
Yes.
I don't know how many other people like that word, but you know, you can make a choice. I feel like there's a lot of things I made choices about, and it may not have been the perfect choice, but it was a choice where I gained a lot of knowledge and experience, and then I might have chosen something. In fact, I've already heard that from a number of folks.
Yeah.
I learned something that maybe I didn't like this particular, you know, profession or work because I made the choice. So actually, there was a lot of benefit that came out of that choice.
Yeah.
So the experimentation of trying something, and you always want to factor in, do I look like I'm just hopping around all the time? But if you just let that factor in, it's going to be terrific to have almost like I'm going to give myself permission to experiment for a little while before I decide I got to do X. That really worked for me. Experimentation.
Your resume is your advertisement. So if you went somewhere for 6 months and it was a disaster, it never has to appear on your resume. Now, it should appear on your employment application when they say list all the places you worked in the last 3 years, but they look at that quickly. They look, you know, your resume is the piece that advertises you. The other thing I would add is be wary of, I heard people say you should always do this or always do that. When I graduated with my doctorate in 1996, my mentor and advisor said, and I was I had different things going on. There's another calling disrupted. I sort of felt called to be a university professor, but we lived in Wichita, Kansas, and they had a recent hire for the only position, the professor position I would be qualified for. So really some of the only choices I had were to be, to go into practice and get my psychology license and kind of do that part of the job, completely stuff I hate. And I remember my mentor saying to me, Lynette, if you don't go into academia now, you'll never get into academia. People start in academia and they stay in academia. I'm in academia. Like, it worked out. And I did that, and then I went to Turkey, and I had an assistant professorship there for 2 years. And I used those skills that in ways I never expected, if you're open to it and if you're open to experimentation. And I remember being offered the position in Turkey, which was completely unexpected and totally kismet. If you know Turkish, that's relevant and funny. And I remember saying to my husband, should I take this job teaching my favorite courses, psychometrics and statistics? And, you know, what if I fail? And he said, my wise engineering husband said, if you fail, no one has to know. You're in Turkey. You don't have to put it on your resume. But it worked out really well and helped launch some. So I think I promised to watch the time. Here we are, 30 seconds ahead of time. Thank you very much. This was fantastic. You guys are fantastic.